Hey, good morning, Drive Time. Welcome back. As always, I'm David Drum, and today I am joined by the one and only Pastor Dennis Gingrich. Dennis, thank you for being here this morning.
Good to be here again.
So Dennis has been with us previously, but today's going to be a little bit different. We actually did this a couple weeks ago with Pastor Joseph Gilchrist, where I'm just going to shoot some questions at Dennis. And he's going to kind of come off the cuff a little bit. Some are just interesting, and other questions are a little more in depth. So, again, thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for spending some time with us. And we're going to jump right into it with an easy warm up question for you. And it's, what is your favorite movie of all time and why?
Well, when I think about my favorite movie, yeah, there's a lot of them, a lot of different genres. This one might seem a little like a chick movie type thing in a way. A portion of it is, but it's a classic. It's The Sound of Music. And I was introduced to it by my wife. She grew up watching it. I never saw it till we were married. But we have watched that movie almost every year. It's on TV. We've watched it over and over again. We've introduced our grandchildren to it. And the fun part about it is that the why is really more, yes, it's got a romance to it, but it's got adventure to it. It's got courage and heroes and the confrontation of evil it's just got all of those things woven into it, and it's such a classic. But I think the thing that's made it more special back in 2016 when we were granted a sabbatical, had gotten a grant through the National Clergy Renewal program, and we took a 4-month sabbatical. And one of the things we did was we spent 6 weeks in Europe, a week in Austria, and we went to Salzburg, where the core of the movie was filmed, and we did a bicycle tour. On bicycles with a guide. We did a bicycle tour of all the places where they filmed that movie. And it was a blast. It was fun to see where they had filmed it and how they had filmed it, and the surroundings of the Austrian Alps. And actually some of the Alp shots were actually a little bit on the Switzerland side of the border, but you could see them right from the site, and it just made it even more special. I've enjoyed it, but it made it more special having toured all of those spots where the various components of that movie was filmed via bicycle. And it was a gorgeous day. It was beautiful. It makes watching the movie now even more fun. And I think we usually watch it once a year. It comes on, and we usually watch it because we've been to those places where they filmed it, and it was cool. So.
Oh, that's neat. That's a different way to view the movie, having already been there or having been there now. So.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, what are your disciplines, whether they be spiritual, physical, personal disciplines? What are the things that you're diligent about?
I'm pretty diligent about my sleep and rest, being one. I start shutting down at 10 o'clock. I turn on the 10 o'clock news. There's only a couple channels that have the 10 o'clock local news. And I watch maybe the first 15 minutes, some of the highlights. And just as it goes into the weather, that's pretty much it. But in the morning, I hit the snooze a couple times this morning about, I think my alarm went off at 5:10, and I didn't get up to about 5:30. Went out for a 2-mile walk. I pretty much do that at least 6 out of 7 mornings. I go out for a walk, and it's about. I'm pretty I like one or two of those mornings to be total silence and just prayer and just, I'm just listening to it's usually before the birds wake up, but enjoying the rabbits or the raccoons that go across my path, or the armadillos or whatever they might be, as I'm out. And then as the sun's coming up, the birds start waking up, and so I do that. But this morning, as in probably 4 out of the 6 mornings, I have my earpods in, and I'm listening to a podcast of some sort. It's usually related to leadership. In most cases, some type of leadership related type things, ministry leadership, or I listen to one occasionally on just on mental health research and stuff like that for good mental health. And then I usually have one day a week I'll listen to a photography related podcast as I'm walking. So those are disciplines, and then I usually get back to the house, and I pretty much I try to do my my devotional time. I have a little news related national news related thing called Morning Brew. That's just a summary. It's a little email. It takes me 5 minutes to read it, of some of the national news summary things that just are like mostly sentence or two, maybe at the longest a paragraph. And I don't turn on TV. I don't do any of those things. But I read through that. I usually read my, as a chaplain for the police department, I usually read the daily activity report of what happened overnight. And then I usually read that in the evening for what happened during the day shift, but just the summary of what went on in our city and some of the key things. And that goes out and from the police department. Those are pretty consistent and regular routines for and then I weekly. I mean, I'm really quite diligent about taking a day off. I try to disengage from ministry. That obviously in ministry there are emergencies. There's times when there's deaths and funerals and things like that, when I have to do a funeral on my day off or something. But generally speaking, I have been very consistent with that for 42 years of ministry of taking at least one day off. Actually, we're in a routine now where in our staff, our pastors, for the first time in my life in 40 some years of ministry, that I actually do 2 days off in a row, Mondays and Tuesdays, where I'm 2 days out of the office. But I've never had more than one day most of my ministry, but I would really have been disciplined about that. I think it's one of the ways that I can avoid burnout and that's a day when I don't try not to do church emails. I try not to do any prep for anything. I try not to take phone calls, do phone calls related to anything related to church or ministry. That's a day when I'll maybe work on photography related stuff, spend it with my wife, just doing other things that need to be done around the house kind of thing, that day or two. And so those are the disciplines that come to mind that I'm, pretty rigid about and consistent with. So
that's good. Well, and I know during your walks, it's not uncommon for you to snap a picture of the sunrise as well.
Yeah, I got a couple this morning, and I haven't posted them anywhere, but it was gorgeous. Yeah, it was pretty this morning. I did. I took them back to show Linda.
Very nice.
And when I got back to the house, and it was beautiful. Those are just iPhone shots, but they're pretty.
Next question is probably a little more in depth than even that. So how do you reconcile humility and confidence with pride and arrogance? What's really the difference between those?
Well, I probably should have given more time to this to have some maybe better nuggets, but of that whole thing. But how I've wrestled with that over the years, and the teaching I've heard on it, and just in my own part of it is, pride is not thinking less of yourself, but it's humility. I mean, in terms of confronting pride and arrogance, is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking more of others, and it's also seeing yourself through the view that God has of you. And I think that's how you stay in a mindset and a heart of humility is by I find that usually people that have very obvious arrogance issues and pride issues are usually people that have very low self-esteem. And I think the more you understand who God made you to be, and the more you understand your uniqueness and why you are who you are, and the healthy you are emotionally and mentally, and with healthy, as Peter Scazzero's book talks about, emotionally healthy spirituality and so on, the more I've seen that it's not this, it's the humility and that heart of humility actually is easier. It's easier, and it comes a little more natural when you see yourself as God sees you, as you recognize your uniqueness, you recognize your gifts, you recognize what you're good at, and you recognize what you do really well. I think to me, I found it's been easier to be humble when I see myself there. I think so much obvious arrogant stuff and pride stuff comes out of a lot of insecurity inside. So the more security I've had of who God has made me to be, and who I am, and what I'm doing and have accomplished, and my gifting and my strengths, and recognizing those, and the less comparison I do with other people, but recognizing it for myself, the easier it is to be humble, and the less chance of exhibiting prideful, arrogant behavior, really. And to me, I just, when I see somebody that's acting and coming across as arrogant, I usually view them as somebody that's really insecure inside, somebody that's hurting, somebody that's a little boy that's been told, might be a man now, but a little boy that's told he's not very good at anything and worthless, and he's trying to still prove himself to somebody, and to people, and to whatever environment. And so I have really, it's really helped me, but doesn't mean I don't ever struggle with being prideful or arrogant when I find myself talking about myself more than engaging other people to talk about themselves. I mean, that's an element of pride that I need to say, no, I need to seek to understand them and to learn to know them, and not just talk about myself here. And so the pride still wants to come to the surface, and I think it always does. But I think the healthier I've become with God in my relationship, understanding His grace, understanding who He is, less I've battled pride and arrogance less. But the reality is, I mean, in some ways, I could have more to be prideful about and more arrogant to be about. The longer I've lived, the more, I guess, success, that I've had, and the more impact I've had could lead to more arrogance and pride. But I found it's really been the other way. If I've developed my character to go deeper into what God says about me and who God says I am, I have less need to brag to everybody else about what I've done. And more need just to realize that God's pleased, and I've carried out His plan, and I've been doing His living out his purposes, and that's enough. And so I think it's the stuff that comes out that would make me look prideful or arrogant is less of a problem for me now at this stage in my journey, because I think I have a better understanding of who I am and why I tick and why my gifts are like they are and why I see things that other people don't see and why I, can do the things that I do well. So does that make sense? I hope so.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. And it's interesting your comparison of as you've, grown older, you theoretically have more to be prideful about, yet God's given you a better picture of who you are. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of, leaders who have been around a long time and really do have a good perspective of who they are, that humility grows more than the prideful side. So it is, it's an interesting point in comparison that you make there.
Yeah. And I mean, it is work. I mean, it's work spiritually, it's work, inner work. And I've said that, I've said that in a recent podcast I did regarding succession and the whole thing of, the story of succession and my developing a succession plan and turning over leadership to younger leaders and taking a lesser role in the church that I started and so on. One of the things that came to me as I was speaking about that and responding to some of their questions in the podcast was, yes, it took a lot of outer work. It took a lot of outer work to get a plan in place and develop the plan and execute the plan and all the other stuff. But it took just as much or more inner work as it did outer work. And sometimes we focus on the outer work as to what we're going to do and accomplish and getting everything in alignment. But we got to keep working on the inner stuff and the inner stuff of humility and pride and not realizing that I don't need to be front and center to have significance. And I don't have to be in the same role that I once was, and to be visible in the way I once was. That's a lot of the inner work that you're working on, because basically all of that, my summary of that was basically because I'm keeping the end in mind. You got to keep the end in mind, whether it's parenting, whether it's whatever. Keep the end in mind. What are you looking for? Well, for me, the end in mind in the church-related world and ministry-related world was I want to start and build and develop a healthy church that is still doing really, really well and even better after I'm no longer in the lead seat. So if I keep the end in mind, that means here's the things that I need to do now so that can be true. And I can say now, 12 years after we executed that succession plan that was in the works for 5 years prior to that, I can say, absolutely, it's one of the best decisions I ever made. And absolutely, the church is thriving in a way that I'm quite confident it wouldn't be thriving if I had held on to everything for myself, because out of my insecurities or whatever, I couldn't let go of leadership, and I couldn't let go of my role and my position. So that to me, I'm healthier. I think the church is healthier, and it exemplifies more the nature of Christ and what he's called us to do than it would have been had I hung on and just been focused on, my own pride of my position and all of that kind of stuff. So.
Gotcha. Well, I'm gonna hit you with one last question here as our time winds down. And it's funny because it kind of ties into what you're just talking about through the pride and humility, work that you've had to do over your career in ministry. Is there something right now that you're just trying to get better at?
Oh, yes. I mean, I could go down two tracks with that. I mean, I'm always trying to get better at being a better leader, being a better pastor, those kind of things. I'm a lifelong learner. I see myself that way. So I'm always reading, listening to podcasts, whatever. I haven't heard it all, know it all, even though, I've had 42 years of ministry experience in my 43rd year of that. But I love to expand myself and push myself in other areas too. And so that's my photography is one of those areas that I love getting better at and love being really intentional about it. So I'm watching, YouTube videos on improving things. I just did a 3-day workshop up in Smoky Mountains National Park, through my professional affiliation with the North American Nature Photographers Association, and that was all about placing myself in a role of getting better and learning something new and fresh, and I'm even getting better by actually teaching what I know. So for the first time, I finally decided to lead a small group of our shared interest groups, and did that in the spring, and enjoyed it so much that doing it again here in the fall, and wrapping it up this next week here. But that helps me get better. That helps me to learn more. It helps me dig deeper. If I'm gotta teach something to somebody else, makes me be more aware of it, and I'm loving it, because when I can explain it to somebody else, it makes me better. It makes me more conscious of what I'm doing, and I think that's true in all of life in so many different areas. And so that's one that I'm working in right now, just because it's my diversion from ministry, but it's something I'm passionate about, but it's also just something that challenges me outside the normal realm of where I'm at. And I like doing that. I like learning something new. I like to try something new, not to be just do the same old things that I know I'm really already good at. So.
Gotcha. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for spending part of your morning with us, and giving us a glimpse into your world. It's easy for us to sit back in the seats and look up and be like, well, this guy's been doing this for decades and decades. He's got it all figured out. And even to just sit here and listen to you kind of verbally process your thoughts on humility and pride and arrogance. And it was very telling. Not only is there wisdom in it, but it was very revealing to us that wherever we're at in that journey, there's still more learning to be done. But then also it shows us who you are as a leader of our church, and helps us to understand why we are the way we are as a church, which is definitely a good thing. So, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for spending the morning with us. Gentlemen, we will see you again next week right here on Drivetime.